In the immediate aftermath of a shock Valentine's Day split, there were no signs of heartbreak amongst the Rovers squad as they embraced Partick Thistle on Saturday. Finlay Pollock rose to the occasion in the first half, taking advantage of Kyle Turner's best efforts to get back with an X, and slamming home a cross that was gift-wrapped by Dylan Easton. In the second half, despite the referee's best efforts, Stuart Bannigan refused to kiss and make up with Jamie Gullan, and was lucky to only receive one card for his efforts. All in all, it was a perfect date for Barry Robson, as his side didn't give away as much as a single shot, but with his job hanging in the balance, it'll take more than a box of chocolates and petrol station flowers for Kris Doolan to win back the Thistle fans. This is the Oh No 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 podcast. I am Duncan Cameron, and feeling the love with me this evening, we've got Allan Douglas Munn, first of all. How are you, Allan?
I'm good. Today, unlike yesterday, I've remembered my laptop, so we're all good to go. We don't have to miss anything for the first 20 minutes, like we did yesterday with music in Celtic Park, where there was nothing for 20 minutes because I sourced another laptop.
I was slightly concerned Gordon Adamson was going to have to start singing again.
Could have been worse, could have been me. Or John.
We've got Scott Fleming as well. How are you, Scott?
Aye, superb. I mean, was a flawless performance yesterday, and it couldn't have gone any better. We've been asking for a performance like this, no nerves going into the final 20 minutes, 3 goals up, clean sheet, 3 points. Now within we're within touching distance in terms of if we win our games, we're on level points with Partick. So, no, things are looking up again.
Yeah, definitely. We've swung wildly back into the optimistic
As the
side
whole
of things
season
again.
has.
Yeah, exactly. We'll be in tears again by the middle of next week. We've got Iain Latto tonight as well. How are you, Iain?
I'm good. It feels like a long time since I've been on post-victory. So, a welcome return.
Absolutely. And rounding us off tonight, we've got Robbie Weir as well. How are you, mate?
Yeah, very good. Throwback to Leslie's introduction pre-Celtic game where they got pumped.
They definitely did. That is as one side of the game as you'll see, I think. And we will come on, obviously, and talk about it in excruciating detail, I imagine. But before we do get to the game itself, let's start with the big shock news that broke on Friday that Andrew Barrowman is no longer the club's chief executive. He's obviously been very much front and centre of really everything that the club's done since that change of ownership. So certainly a real shift in how things are going to operate, you would imagine. Robbie, what do you make of that news overall?
Yeah, I'm gutted that we've lost our source for all our information and who directs the flow of traffic of what's acceptable to say on the podcast and what's not. Sorry, just a little, had to get that out there. No, I think that if you look at where we were before and the track record we've had with CEOs before in the past, Andrew Barrowman's done a good job in terms of where we've came from. At face value, I'm caveating this with, because often these things have a track record where it will come out later down the line, something additional's came out. All we can go off is what we know at the moment, which is that the crowds are up, that we've seen substantial improvements to Celtic Park. We had a very successful season last year. Admittedly, I'm sure that he was the first to admit in a New Year interview that it wasn't as good this season. But yeah, it's the news sort of started swirling about Thursday evening, would I say? And then on into Friday, and then finally on Friday, later on in the evening, there was an email that went out just confirming that it was a very strangely worded email. It wasn't so much he's not been sacked, but also he's not resigned. It's more relieved of his duties, was it?
It just says he is no longer the chief executive. Yeah, that's the language used.
Again, you go into the tweeps like us with our, we're not VL enough to do an emergency podcast on a Friday night, but keep track of things on Company House. I believe that he's got still a shareholding within the club. So, yeah, at face value, I had I'd only spoken to Andrew Barrowman ever once, which was at the game against Kirkcaldy and Dyser, where I met him very, very briefly. And then, other than that, a couple of conversations online. He'd been very supportive in terms of us with the podcast, and I've not really got too much negative to say about him. I would say that that's probably not reflective across the full support, though. I certainly can understand why maybe people in other areas have had sort of butted heads with him, and there's been sort of clearly the likes of the 200 Club, for example. I don't know the full story with that, caveat it, but there might be people in there that have been slightly aggrieved. But yeah, I think that over the piece, I would say that it was a force for positive, I would like to think, within the club.
Yeah, Iain, would you agree with that, reflecting on his tenure as a whole, a net positive?
Yeah, I don't think it's up for debate that he's leaving us in a better position than when he joined. If you just look at the developments within the main stand specifically, like, you know, the changes and the improvements that have been made there. Robbie's touched on it, the great season that we had last year. Cycled through a couple of managers, which has probably pissed a few people off. But I think for me, it's been a net positive. The shareholding thing worries me a wee bit. I was thinking about this earlier today, and having someone with that many shares who is now like a disgruntled ex-employee with no emotional attachment to the club, I think that probably needs tidied up, pretty soon. Whether that means the remaining board members buy him out or what happens to those shares, it concerns me slightly. So I'd like to think that the board are going to be on the ball to kind of tidy that issue up pretty soon. But I thought he was a good guy. Minimal interactions, similar to Robbie. Spoken to him a couple of times. Always very affable. Happy to talk to you. So yeah, I was in the pro Barrowman camp. And you know, you're looking for your CEO to be in place for a wee bit longer than 18 months.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know whether we're going to replace him, if we're going to get someone else, or if that position's just going to be sealed off now. Just need to wait and see.
Yeah, it's an interesting position, having the CEO and assessing your CEO, because it's basically a case of, well, everything is his remit. Like, he has been, up till now, been paid by the football club to run the football club. It's really just a case of everything that happens ultimately is down to him. Or not down to him, but it's his responsibility. Like, that's what he gets judged on. And I think there are obviously things that you don't see, like the financials and all that kind of stuff. You get a look at them once a year, but you don't know the ins and outs and all these other kind of things like that. But broadly speaking, it's easier to assess a CEO than it is like your sporting director or these other things, because you're just going, right, is the football club in a better place now than it was then? And I think it's very, very difficult to argue that it's not in a better place. There are ways of working and ways of doing things that, you know, I think, again, you could find issue with anyone. And yeah, I'm the same as you. I'm kind of disappointed almost that it's come to an end so soon, because it's that 18 months for somebody in that kind of level. You really want people in those jobs for years and years to really be able to build things. So it will be interesting to see what happens next. Scott, what are you thinking about the whole thing?
I must say I was surprised when I started hearing like first sort of rumours that it was potentially going to be happening, especially kind of during the season. I thought maybe if there was ever like any issues between the board members or whatever, or Barrowman, it might have waited until the end of the season sort of thing. But no, when it came out on Friday night, it just, to be honest, Friday, it just picked up as the hours were going by that it was happening. So, yeah, obviously group chats and stuff start talking what's going on. But yeah, we don't really know the full story. As you say, it says on the website, it's quite unclear of what's gone on because he's not been sacked and he's not walked away either. So, yeah, but in terms of his stint with the club, I'll agree that I do think that him, Dean McKenzie, Colin Smart, Rory Kilgour, they've all together as a team have brought this club up from where it was. Because, I mean, even just go back 3 seasons ago, like, we were really struggling as a club off the park. We were getting at the bare bones at certain parts of the club as well, and we're just scraping by. But we're now sort of healthy crowds weekly. I think there was a stat by Wraith Rovers stat today saying that we've now reached a certain goal of over 3,000 home crowds at like 27 or 30 home games or something, which is just outstanding, to be honest, at this sort of level. But yeah, obviously we've spoke about it throughout the season. Like, there's been times where I've not agreed with the stuff that Andrew Barrowman's either came out with, or the decisions that have been made in terms of, obviously, Ian Murray sacking at the time. There's other things that have gone on, or you've heard that have been going on as well, which you don't know if they're 100% true or not, but you're just... everyone's got their own opinions of everybody, and yeah, it's... at the same time, I thank him for his time, because, yeah, as I've just said, he did definitely improve the club from when he came in, but I was getting to the point I was starting to lose a little bit more... I don't know if I lost respect for him, but I was losing a little bit of will with him. Just the fact that there was a few things that just over the months that were getting on, and there was decisions getting made that I wasn't too happy about. But I still think that he done a good enough job in his time with the club.
Yeah, Alan, slightly different question for you. A football club of this size and at this level, do you need a CEO?
It's a tough one to say. I mean, ultimately, the guys who are left on the board and who are essentially running the club now, they all have other jobs. They have other companies that they run. I don't know how much time they can dedicate to running the football club. It kind of feels like with everything we've got going on now, you probably do need someone there on a day-to-day basis who's kind of overseeing things. Now, whether that can be a combination of, like Graham Kilgour looks after the commercial side, maybe you've got like, Laura looks after the office side of things. So maybe they've decided they don't need someone to kind of, maybe now that the kind of bulk of the infrastructure projects that have been happening in the stadium, maybe they're done now. So maybe the feeling is that they don't need someone to oversee that, and maybe freeing up what I don't doubt is a pretty decent salary is worthwhile. It's without being heavily involved in the day-to-day run of the club, it's hard to say, but that's on the face of it, you would think there needs to be someone overseeing everything. But
that's how I feel about it, and this is, like I said before, that there's things that you see and things that you don't see, and that's what you don't see is the day-to-day working.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm sure this isn't the case, but if Andrew Barrowman sits in his office all day playing solitaire and all this good stuff's happening anyway, then you could make a good case for maybe edging him out the door. Whereas obviously, if he's doing it all single-handedly and he's up a ladder putting the cladding together, maybe he's a bit more indispensable. Obviously, the truth will be somewhere in the middle. And I think it comes down to what you said there, and Scott said it as well. There's a lot of people involved at the kind of top level of the football club who have a lot of expertise and who are putting money in as well, but they have other interests. And it's, do you need a central figure who actually, I mean, again, as far as you would imagine, is taking money out rather than putting money in, but is there, 9 to 5 and whatever else to actually be the one person whose dedicated role and purpose is just furthering the football club effectively. I think it's an interesting point because I think it's the level of football that we're at that makes it a question.
Yeah.
Premiership clubs, it's not an argument. You need somebody there. You need somebody doing that. I don't know. I haven't checked this. I imagine all of the Premiership clubs will have a chief exec or similar. And then League One, broadly, you don't. League One, broadly, you're looking at it's a board / almost kind of committee model where you're not paying someone a decent salary to be there running the football club. The people on the board run it as best they can outside of their other interests. So,
See, just to come in there, I think that it's probably to the credit of the Andrew Barrowman and the remainder of the board that have came in. I think before, I sort of said this on Pine Bovril, there was some people that were sort of commenting about what's happened with areas of the club, and they didn't like that it became overly commercialised, shall they say, and lost their family values, I think was the word. But for me, I look around that South Stand and I'm seeing more and more. I was out a few weeks ago with my friend. He's a Rangers fan, stays in Kinghorn. His brother-in-law is a Celtic fan. They've both got young boys. What's the solution to get them both into football? Well, we'll go along with the Rovers. And he was in Lewis Stevenson's year at school. I'm seeing that with a lot of families now where they're taking kids along. I feel like with Rovers, though, I think that for the longest period we've been in the Fife Free Press hammer home this point for articles for years of Rovers losing 125 grand a year, continually pumping out the same content time and time again. For too long we've been in the sort of good graces of having key men like Johnson, like Mario Kyra, who would just, obviously there had been the shortfall at the club and they're the people that stepped up, and we should obviously, again, regardless of whatever happened when anyone's tenure, they've been the guys that have stood up, and as local businessmen or as key figures, they've put the money in to cover where fans haven't before. I think it's been a necessary point that, look, I know that not everyone's going to agree with this, but there has needed to be a degree of stepping forward and taking the first steps moving forward into the future, because that model before just didn't seem sustainable. So yeah, I'm keen to see the next steps as to where we go with it and how we evolve as a club.
Yeah, the sustainability part of that is key. And I mean, the way to do that is by, driving your revenue creation or whatever, term you want to give that. And I understand the distaste maybe that some people feel for that, where it's like, oh, what are they selling now? And this is $5 a month and that's about. Ultimately, you're really just shaking your fist at capitalism at a certain point. That's the way the world works. That's not Wraith Rovers. That's leaving money on the table if you don't do it. And ultimately, we're in a competition with 9 other teams who, whether they're doing it or not, it gives us an advantage if we do it. And I think that's what it has to be.
And also, nothing's changed in the sense of if all you want to do is pay for your ticket on a Saturday and go and maybe buy a pie in a programme, that's all you need to do. You don't have to join Club 1883. You don't have to buy the third kit. You don't have to do any of these things if you don't want to. But ultimately, a club at our size, we need to be making as much money as possible to compete. We need to make money from people who are Rovers fans. We need to try and make money from people who are football fans, but maybe not Rovers fans. And then we also need to try and make money from people who are in the community who don't give a shit about football at all. And that's where all of these kind of extra facilities come in, and you can make money on non-match days as well. Having the cafe in the stadium during the week, things like that. That'll be making a bit of, probably not a huge amount, but just ways of making more money that all ultimately feeds back into the squad.
It's like that with the happy anniversary to sliding into Sunday. It's because, again, that's a perfect example, and I know that there was a sort of LinkedIn post and after sort of saying, here's how we managed to sort of take something that's quite controversial, that's been shared a load of times, and being able to use that for businesses that have been involved. So obviously last season, you can remember straight off the bat, it was Forge Daily Legal that were the social media sponsors, because we had that many moments. Now it's obviously Audio Emotion. But you look at the partnerships that they're doing with the likes of, the most recent one was Gym 64, where they're just going down. Very funny video to watch as well. The guys getting put through their paces in terms of the exercise challenges, and Grum asking them trivia questions while they're all swearing away and getting bleeped out. But yeah, just stuff like that's just stuff that can be used to sort of say to businesses, previously, before it might have been we're a local football club, we can do this or that. But now it's okay, we can get you this engagement, we can share your business. And again, it's all just, I know it's part of the modernisation for the club, and that people will maybe take issue at the stuff that we've done yesterday, having a laugh at Stuart Bannigan's expense. More on that later. But yes, it's ultimately, it's there for a reason, and it's there to try and help us. So yeah.
It is. You'd want to get away from the point where you need to have rich people around to underwrite things. And that's a long journey. I'm absolutely certain that's still happening from time to time at different points with cash flow and the way that these things work. But it's not realistic to run on a model forever that just relies on the goodwill of people who've done very well for themselves and have the club's best wishes at heart. You need to try and get away from that at some point. And I think that's where the model is. And ultimately, bringing in a CEO or having a model that includes a CEO is kind of fraught with danger anyway, because it means you're handing an awful lot over to someone who, you're paying a wage to. So you're picking one person and basically going, right, you're actually, previously it would have been the manager, but almost like you're the most important person in this organisation right now. And it's a bit like, it's like signing a marquee player a little bit as well, because you kind of need them to be really good, but not incredibly good. Because if they're actually too good, they'll get poached and they'll go taken somewhere else. So it's tricky. It'll be interesting to see what happens. The feeling I get kind of reading between the lines of that last little bit of the very brief statement is that there won't be a replacement imminently. I don't imagine the board are out there today, doing interviews to try and find another CEO. That sounds like at the very least there will be a kind of cooling off period, and they'll obviously have a plan for that. But I do wonder if it might not be something we revisit relatively soon, because I think at the size and the intention of what we're doing at the moment, for me, I think it's something that's there. But I can understand the arguments people who would disagree with that.
The club have probably also, just to add into it before we finish on it, is they've probably looked at it as, you guys have said, do we need it in the Championship? And they've maybe looked at it and went, well, where they want to head to, they might need to take that step to get Barrowman there already. And I mean, at one point we were looking very close to being in the top flight, and that's when you need it, as you say. But they were clearly forward thinking and thinking that that's what they wanted at the time. And as you say, with all the projects that were going on, maybe it was something that was mandatory and needed. Maybe it's not now, and they've maybe just looked at it and went, look, this could be a wage that we could be like saving on going forward. And they've obviously spoke to Barrowman about it and said that this is the way that they want to go forward with it. So fair play to the club with that, because obviously Dean McKenzie and Colin Smart and the rest of the board members, they're obviously the ones that are overseeing everything as well now. So they've got to decide also financially where the club are, because, I mean, until the Celtic Cup draw came, I'm not sure with the projections of what we might have made at the start of the season, how we would have looked at the end of the season, because at best you're looking at 4th or 5th, and then at worst case scenario you could be looking at 9th. So and you would hope that they maybe budgeted for 3rd or 4th, just going, look, we might not win the league even though we were that close, but at least make the playoffs. But then if you're losing out, we seen a graphic not that long ago about the difference in prize money, even in just 1 or 2 positions. If you're jumping for 2nd all the way to even maybe 7th, that's a lot of money. So they've got to think it that way as well.
Yeah, I don't think that you can shy away from that. And I would say, asking as a fan, I think the one thing that you do want is just the transparency. You don't need all the gory details, but if there is anything that did come in the pipeline that was sort of on a financial side, just be open and transparent so that people can get ahead of it first away. And just that it doesn't become a bigger issue, because these things, football clubs are notoriously bad for hiding behind and sort of, you look at it and then it snowballs behind the scenes, and then the next thing you know, everyone's asking, well, we didn't realise we had this much debt. I mean, you just look at Celtic Thistle, and they've been in debt to sort of key stakeholders. They've had some harebrained schemes that have just been there and then got chucked out, and then all of a sudden it's into administration. So I think the main thing's transparency. But to be honest, even then, I feel like with this board, they have been so far came across as being very transparent and open and honest. I get that they might not all get along at the best of times, but I'm sure that if there was anything that was untoward, that they would be open about it.
There's definitely some Sorry, Duncan. There's definitely some people in the support who seem to be kind of chomping at the bit, like, we need to know the reason why Barrowman's left. It's like, you know, like, do you really, like, yes?
Even if they get it, though, they
just want to know the reason.
Exactly. Like, I don't really understand the total need to know, like, as you say, the gory details and the ins and outs of every single thing that happens in the boardroom. It's like, you're never going to get that. Like, where have you been for the last 18 months? Like, you're not going to get that from this board, and I don't think you need to. Like,
yeah.
I just don't think it's essential.
Just look at the last two players that have left the club. Well, then he's not a last player, but look at Ross Mullin last season, and then look at Sam Stanton this season. You had one player that just didn't want to be at the club, and the club came out and eventually said, look, he doesn't want to be at the club, but we waited until January to say this because that's when we can actually do something about it. And so it's also the same with Ross Mullin. There was obviously something happened, but they said, look, they didn't really say anything about it, but at the same time, it was like, well, they dealt with the situation at the time. So I'm not sure what else.
Who's Ross Mullin? That's not a name I'm familiar with. I don't know him.
I think it's an interesting point, though, in terms of transparency and communication, all that kind of stuff, because Andrew Barrowman has very much been that guy for this ownership group. Like, that will have to change.
Yeah.
And it'll be interesting to see how that changes, because he's very much been like the lightning rod, both in a good way and a bad way. And I say, to an extent, that's the job. And that's what he gets paid for. So last season, when things were going well, he was doing the interviews and he was in the paper, because again, that's his job. And then this season, things haven't been going well. It's still him. And, you know, again, we've had conversations, you look at Twitter, you look whatever else. How often does Andrew Barrowman's name, or how often has it come up versus, you know, anybody else's? You could probably take the board, or the rest of the board combined, and their names are mentioned less than his, because he's been the lightning rod. So that, to your point, Ian, in terms of like what's happened and why is he gone, yeah, actually not really bothered. But like, what is the plan going forward? That's more interesting to me. It's actually at this point you're like, don't actually know who that would come from, and it'll be interesting to see whether that level of communication, does that now change? Does that now actually drop away? Was that a Barrowman-driven thing? Or was it a case of that level of communication is the ethos of this ownership group, and he was the figurehead, so that was who it came through?
That's what I'm saying. Who's going to deliver that message now? It's like Dean McKenzie, I think, is fairly upfront about he's not interested in doing the media type stuff. Do you know what I mean? Rory, don't know if he's there particularly often. I don't know how often he's there. I don't imagine he's going to be someone that's going to be doing that. He's running what I believe is multiple full-time businesses. Colin Smart, never heard them talk. Do you know, like, you're kind of running out of people within that hierarchy who can deliver that message. So is it going to change, or is someone going to step up?
We'll just send Blair along to do it. It's going to be fine. It'll be all right. Blair was getting slaughtered on Pine Bovril the other day, so that was...
That's why he was there last week.
Never stops complaining.
The boy Hopcroft, yeah.
But that's it. 'Cause I mean, I think I'm right in saying that nominally Colin Smart is the interim chairman still.
Yeah.
So I think he'd be sort of top of the tree. But again, in terms of the actual, what does that look like? What does that mean? And who then does the sort of outward communication? I say this is all stuff that's up for grabs.
Yeah.
To be honest, they probably also want to keep the reasons for it in house as well, because it doesn't look good for anyone. Definitely. If you're coming out and you look, I mean, it's the easiest thing in the
if
world.
We've learned anything recently,
yes. I mean, if Andrew Barrowman comes out citing Stuart Kettlewell just being the next person to do that, then online abuse, etc. But
I mean, the only other kind of club employee that you regularly hear from who's not involved in the playing side is Grum. And he's normally the one actually interviewing. If it's not Davy Hancock, it's normally him actually doing the interviews. I don't imagine it's his remit as head of business development to be kind of giving statements out to the fans. So unless he's in for a change of job, it's difficult to see where this kind of will come from, other than maybe just statements being put out rather than interviews.
That's why I suspect that they will potentially look to get a replacement in. over time. But again, I think for now, it's not one that's going to be. It's not like a manager, for example. It's not got an influence on the pitch. Nobody looks up and it's like, better give that extra 10% because the boardroom's not quite full. It's
Aye, so definitely a big change, a very, very big change, and we'll see what happens. But no, I agree with you. I don't imagine there'll be anything about it that we'll hear relatively soon. I don't think we need to. I don't think you need like an immediate response from the boardroom. But it's a case of when we get to the summertime, we'll want to hear more about what are the long-term plans, because this is what we're interested in. So yeah, very interesting to see what else
much
comes
like
down
Scott
that
as
track.
well. Just to say thanks as well for the effort, because I get that. I think it's quite easy to overlook, and it's the same with anyone that's left the club at that point. Like for the last year and a half, we've had some of the most ridiculous highs as fans of the club, and he's been involved in that. So yeah, it's certain thanks for those.
Yeah, definitely. Right, I tell you what, let's have a break, and then we'll come back and we will talk about some football, just for a change. Blair.
Yes, mate.
You're a man.
Yes.
And you have thoughts and feelings and emotions.
Yes.
Are you good at talking about all that stuff?
Well, I try my best, but I don't know. Probably not as much as I should.
I'm the same. I feel better after getting stuff like that off my chest, but I don't do it anywhere near often enough. Have you heard about Andy's Man Club?
They're brilliant. They create a safe space for men to sit down and talk about the important stuff. And they do it right across the country as well.
Yeah, exactly. They've got more than 200 meetings across the UK, and it's every Monday night at 7 o'clock, including one at Celtic Park.
And if anyone wants more information on it, they can go to andysmanclub.co.uk or search for Andy's Man Club on Facebook. It's okay to talk, and now we're going to get back to talking about the Rovers.
Allan, when we got our team lineups through on Saturday there, 2 o'clock, I imagine you get it slightly earlier, actually.
I don't actually, no. I don't.
Do you not? You just have to just do refreshing your phone. Just
Pretty
wait
much,
to
I get it.
a copy couriered up to the box.
I get the team sheet it comes on Twitter before I get the team sheet, to be honest. So yeah, and then I start making my notes. It's actually quite funny. One of the things I do in it is I go through the like you like to think I know who the home players are, but the away players I'll be like going like yesterday it was like so and so's he's bald, he's got tattoos, he's wearing red Under Armour, that kind of thing. Just because if there's a bit of a stramash in the box, I can see right who the hell was that? Oh yeah, that was him.
Yeah, or for example, a goal goes in and you have to wait for Scott to tell you in Wraith TV to put it in.
You know, there was right. Like, I know we're jumping ahead of it, but I was certain it was Finlay Pollock, and I was like, I'm saying to my 9-year-old son who's in the box, and I was like, was that Finlay Pollock? He's like, I don't know. I was looking at my phone. I was like, oh. So then I'm trying to look at. I've got Wraith TV on a TV in the box with me, and I'm like, but it wasn't a great picture. I'm like, I think that's
just
Pollock.
as well you didn't have the Wraith commentary because they would have told you Liam Dick had scored.
Who actually put the ball in the first place, I think. But then I would say to the people who were sitting in front of me, I was like, was that Pollock? And one of them goes, he thinks it was an OG. I was like, right, I'm going to go with Pollock. Why not? And that's when Iain was like, yeah, good guess.
Can you remember when we had I think it was John Baird playing for us, and then he scored a goal and someone else got credited for it, and he literally turned to the box absolutely raging, and then correction, goal scorer was John Baird.
Well, apparently someone had done it previously. They'd announced the goal scorer, and the person who was there for the bookies thing hadn't seen who'd scored and just went with the announcement, and it was wrong, and bookies ended up paying out on the wrong scorer or something. It's like
good.
That's not a game you want to get into. Speak from experience. Getting a baller doing that.
Reserves game.
Yeah, reserves game specifically. In the pre-match, Allan, I threw you a bit of a hospital pass because I asked you what it was that Barry Robson saw in Finlay Pollock that maybe the rest of us weren't seeing. Do you want to just apologise on behalf of both of us just now, or do you want to wait till later on?
You know what? Without sounding like an ass, what I said at the time, I believed at the time. I was speaking from as someone who has absolutely no footballing knowledge whatsoever, other than being a jobber who goes and watches games. I said what I felt at the time. I stand by it as an opinion at the time. I am absolutely delighted that I was wrong. Like, you know what? It was. I'm fairly certain Finlay Pollock didn't listen to the podcast and didn't say, "I'm going to show those bastards. They know nothing." But you know what? I'm absolutely thrilled that he did. Fair play to the lad. He went out and, I mean, when the team list came out and we saw he was on there, I don't think any of us were surprised. We were probably a little bit. We were probably a little bit. Really? Like, fully admitting that he'd had a very good first 15 minutes in Hamilton, but hadn't necessarily done that well since then, without being terrible. Like, he's never had a terrible game for us, ever. It's just sometimes you've seen him and thought maybe someone else could offer more. Fair play to him. He was fantastic yesterday. He did everything you'd want of a player in that position. I'm an idiot. I know nothing. He's brilliant. Bring it on. Let's have more of it. And more importantly, when I tweeted about that, actually, I kind of retweeted his man of the match. There was a Rovers tweeted him with his little man of the match trophy, and I was like, and I said pretty much the same thing. You know, delighted to be completely wrong. He was brilliant. I know nothing. And one of the people who liked the tweet was his dad. So there we go.
Yeah.
It's a good thing you didn't double down on that, I think.
Oh, absolutely.
I think, and again, obviously, I know we say this every week. We'll go through the incidents in the game a little bit, but Robbie, how much credit are you giving Barry Robson for the sort of mini renaissance that we've seen from Finlay Pollock?
Yeah, a huge amount of credit. I think that as a manager, you've got to stick by your players. Robson didn't bring Finlay Pollock in, but he clearly sees him, and we sort of mentioned this on the pre-match podcast, that he clearly sees the attributes that he brings to the table as being a net positive for the squad. It was funny to read an article gushing about from someone within the Hearts setup, basically about how the importance of B teams and how we're finally seeing them come to fruition, and that obviously you've got the young lad Wilson up top for Hearts who's scoring goals, and how some players take longer in their development. And then Finlay Pollock basically came in as a winger, and Barry Robson's being like, actually, have you ever played up top? There you go. And just being put in there. So yeah, there's still as good as the Lowland League is for B team players, arguably, based on what these clubs are saying. There's nothing like the old Scottish Championship to be able to get a player set in. But yeah, again, much as Allan says, fair credit to Finlay Pollock, because he was right place at the right time. I don't think there was any sort of major shocks in the lineup, but to be honest, I was still happy to see how we went up against Partick. I feel like I was more interested in the way that Thistle had actually lined up, because they had Ray come in as a signing, but they didn't use him at all. They decided to keep O'Reilly at left back with Macbeth and Ashcroft as their centre halves. And straight as soon as I saw that, I thought, oof, I wasn't expecting it. Very happy to see it though. And as it turned out, yeah, we were completely dominant.
Yeah, I have some thoughts on some of Kris Doolan's decisions that we'll
they
get
had
to
the
in due
fullbacks
course.
very high as well. Like, they were playing a really high. Like, it was essentially a back two rather than a back four. Can I notice it from my position in the main stand that I maybe wouldn't spot it quite so much in the south stand? But Megwa and O'Reilly were both playing really high up.
I think that
was a bit silly.
speaks really to the credit that Finlay Pollock deserves and the credit that Barry Robson deserves for doing it, because it's that like two-man press with Gullan and Pollock that Thistle just couldn't live with at all. No. And that's what Pollock's been so good at, that I think when earlier in the season he was playing wide and he was running from deep, weren't really seeing it. That's where any kind of, not necessarily criticism, but anything we've been slightly down on him, I think it's been based on those earlier performances. But this, when he's up front and he's running at them, he was like, pitch perfect for that yesterday. Like, absolutely exactly what we need them to do, and he did it all day. The other sort of notable point in the starting lineup for me, Iain, is the well, it's the continuation of the back three, and Josh Mullin, again, sort of preferred at right wing back. Tell me, well, what do you think about that situation, sort of generally and specifically how it played out yesterday?
I don't think it's one that a month ago anybody would have foreseen. If you'd have said, a month, 5-6 weeks ago, we're going to play with Josh Mullin at right wing back, we're going to beat Partick Thistle 3-0, and he's going to play at Celtic Park there, and it seemed just inconceivable, but he's done exceptionally well. There's no doubt in it. He obviously started there at Hamilton, played very well there, and I've got no real issue with it. I want to have an issue with it, almost subconsciously. I see it and I'm like, that can't be right. And then he plays and he's good, and I'm like, yeah, that kind of works. If we're looking at why I think it works ultimately, Mullin, his best attribute is crossing from 40 yards out. Do you know what I mean? That deep swinging low high cross to the back post. It's really hard to defend. There's a lot of whip on it, and it's easy for players to go and attack. And I feel like when he plays wide, as in winger, he starts too high up the park. So when we get the ball to him, invariably he's got to try and beat a man. And Josh Mullin is many things, but he's not that quick, and he's not really that type of player that's going to drop the shoulder and then go past him, similar to an Aidan Connolly. So playing in that wing back position allows him to start that little bit deeper and be the sort of backup layoff ball when if Gullan's dropped wide or whatever, and then we can kind of work off that. His dead ball delivery is excellent. I'm sure he took the free kick for the second goal.
He did.
In the initial kind of build up to that. So yeah, he's got his attributes, and I'm really pleased for him. Seems a lovely guy. A lot of people, probably myself included, thought in January he'll be out. He'll be the one that we're trying to ship, but he's bided his time. He's obviously applied himself in training. He keeps himself exceptionally fit, and he's back in the squad and he's doing well. So yeah, well done, Josh, and I hope it continues.
That second goal is a really, really good example of what you're saying there. Obviously, I've been banging on about wing backs for weeks now. I'm sure everybody's fed up it. But the kind of phase before that, it's exactly what you say. The ball goes up to Gullan. I think the Rovers turn the ball over in the midfield. It's popped into Gullan, and Josh Mullin is already at full pelt. And as Gullan turns to look, Mullin's going beyond him to basically be the furthest player forward. That wasn't happening 6-8 weeks ago. We were playing a back three, and then we had wing backs that were like, oh, should I be going or should I not be going? And if I'm going, am I fully committing? And then as he cut to yesterday, one of the strikers has got the ball and Mullin's beyond him already. And it gets knocked in. And Allan, as you say, O'Reilly's trying to push on, I think, to basically press him back. And it's not working at all. O'Reilly has to take the booking because he's got no other choice. And Mullin's just by him and is going to keep going. And it's that free kick that leads to that goal. The other bit of this, and this is the bit I thought was really interesting yesterday, and I think, again, is a really nice little bit of tactical work that really makes that formation work. We were lopsided in the way we were matching up to Thistle. So obviously we've got the back three and then we've got the two wing backs. So you've got Stevenson on the left and you've got Mullin on the right. And Thistle were playing Scott, you and I's favourite, the 4-2-3-1. So they had Logan Chalmers on the one side and Aidan Fitzpatrick on the other. And as far as wingers at this level go, two really dangerous wingers. They're direct, they'll go and try and beat you. And on the left-hand side, Stevenson was picking up Chalmers, which is what you would expect. So your wing back is matching up to their winger. But on the other side, we were letting Mullin go, and it was Docherty who was coming across to pick up Fitzpatrick. So it's totally lopsided. Like your wing back's picking up on one side, but your centre half is picking up on the other. But it worked brilliantly because it meant that you've got sort of your best defensive ability up against their best attacking ability, and then you're getting the best out of Mullin. So although nominally he's playing as the wing-back, he's much more attacking than the defensive side, which even again a few weeks ago, like at Dunfermline, we didn't have that balance sorted out yet. We basically saw that at East End Park, that between Docherty and Mullin, they hadn't worked out yet who was supposed to be dealing with McCann. And I think Robson's basically watched that and gone, right, that is a problem. I'm going to solve it. Docherty, you deal with them. And it worked brilliantly yesterday. And again, as you say, Allan, O'Reilly's then stepping out to try and meet Mullin because Mullin's then free. And O'Reilly doesn't want to be doing that. Again, to your point, Robbie, what the hell Kris Doolan's doing fielding a centre half at left back when he's brought in a new left back is absolute madness.
You chuck
He's
on
only
it.
there for the interviews.
It's well, that was one that Thistle fans called out, the fact that none of their other squad members went out for that interview. It was the left back who came on, and the bizarre thing is that he comes on at half time, so he's clearly fit enough to play 45 minutes of football. So you would think, like, put him on from the start. There's nothing that you've really gained. You've shipped 5 goals to Falkirk last week, so why are you sticking with a left back there? So feel free to keep doing that if you want, Kris. Long may it continue.
On the other side,
for very long, but
on the other side with Megwa, I was really annoyed when we didn't get him.
Mm-hmm.
I thought it was a perfect fit. You know, by all accounts, we were after him, and it went down to the last 2, and he's gone to Thistle. I don't think we've missed much going by.
Not on the evidence of this season.
One, the evidence of the Thistle fans and what they've got to say about him, and 2, yesterday, stinking. Absolutely stinking. Like half the player of what I remember him being like at Airdrie last year. I don't remember him really getting forward much. His delivery was terrible. I don't know what's happened to him. We're not missing him anyway.
He never got near Easton either. Whereas last season at Airdrie, he had Easton in his pocket a lot of the time.
He's pocketed.
Yeah. Even sort of the way that it looked in the run up to the first goal, just Jamie Gullan just absolutely bullies him. Like, just looks complete control of the situation. It wasn't Megwa closing him down. Megwa was coming back and he didn't really know how to handle it. But yeah, to the point. What was the figure that they were saying at the Jags Foundation thing? They paid 50k extra to get Megwa through the door.
Money well spent, lads.
On a loan player.
On a loan player.
Like 50 grand down for a player you're getting for 9 months or whatever. That is wild business. And I'm sure stuff like that happens all the time, but that is madness. There's one in the highlights, there's an example where it's the move that goes on to be the offside, where Ray clips a body. That move starts with Megwa putting a cross in, and he doesn't get it off the ground.
Yeah.
Basically just like really meekly curls the ball into, it's one of the defenders, I didn't check, into the feet. And it goes out to Scott Martin. And Megwa just kind of, like, he drifts out in the wing because he's making himself an option, but he just looks like he could not care less that he's just shanked this cross. It's barely even a shank, he's nothing on it at all. I think...
bad enough to get hooked off for Kyle Turner to play right back at half time anyway.
Actually, I'm going to come back to that. I'll spend some time on it. I think, fans of people who enjoy misery, I think the Draw, Lose or Draw, the Thistle podcast might well be worth a listen. Just because there was so much in that.
Any timeline that you've got structured out for this podcast.
I know, I've been trying to put lines through what we've covered, and honestly, I'm all over the place. Right, let's go back to the start. 8 minutes in, we got a goal. But just actually, before we get to the actual goal itself, very briefly, in the sort of build-up, but quite a long way out, it starts with a little clipped ball from Josh Ray. So everybody's back and they're all tightened round this 6-yard box, which, if you're anything like me, gives you palpitations. But then he just kind of dinks the ball out to Lewis Stevenson. Scott, is that why Josh Ray's in the team?
I think it's certainly high up on the list, probably why he's been brought in, which is, the modern keepers these days. They've been brought in because they're supposed to be an 11th player now. Like, it's just the way the modern game's moved, that you need your goalie these days to be able to handle the ball at his feet. And, I mean, we've seen it once or twice at Celtic Park. He was trying these sort of dinked passes as well, and obviously Celtic were all over us to close us down so quickly. But Partick, clearly, they kept the three players in the front three anyway quite high up on us, obviously expecting us to pass it out. And Robson's obviously worked on it in training to say, look, if they do this, let's just dink it out to either Mullin or Stevenson out wide, and then let's take it down and try and play from there. And it worked perfectly in that instance. I don't really, mainly because Partick had no shots in the game, I don't really remember Ray having to do it again in the game because he only had like 2 other goal kicks in the game. So
Yeah.
I think it would have been interesting had Partick tested us a bit more in terms of giving us more goal kicks and stuff like that to see if that was going to be a continued thing or if that was just, let's just try it once just to catch them out and see if it can create some sort of attack out of it. And yeah, as I say, it worked well. And I think going forward that we could expect to see this quite a lot. You even seen in the second half, any ball that was kind of overhit by the Thistle sort of midfielders towards a Blady or to the wingers or whatever, Ray was pretty much at the edge of his box or even outside his box to sweep it up and just straight away, foot on it, just looking up. Look, he almost looked like he couldn't care what was going on. He was just that relaxed and then went, oh, I can see him, and just pings a 40, 50 yarder. And if it's not gone to him, our boys at least won the header or the second ball from it. So he clearly is pretty decent at striking a ball to where he needs it to go. And I think that's, going back to your point, I do think that is one of the main reasons he's been brought in.
Yeah, I don't think we're going to spend too much more time on Josh Ray for yesterday. Just very little to do. But he might pop up once or twice more as we go through. But yeah, I did think that was notable, if nothing else. But the goal itself, it's sort of patient build-up. The Rovers have a couple of goes at trying to find a bit of space, kind of down both sides. There's an across from Josh Mullin, as we've spoken about, that reaches Lewis Stevenson. And I was wondering earlier on if that's possibly the first wing-back to wing-back cross that we've successfully completed since Regan Tumulty and Kieran MacDonald. And then there is a lovely through ball from Kyle Turner. And a great finish from Finlay Pollock. Robbie, is that really... That's just sort of what you would call predatory striker play, is it not? That's what you want.
Yeah, before we get into that though, I've been quite transparent before about that I wasn't the most enthusiastic about Jamie Gullan returning, shall we say? Just on the basis that before we knew what to expect from him, but then he's came back and fair play to him because Jamie Gullan Mark V looks a completely different player. Very, very brave, very willing to throw himself into the challenges, looked like he was ready for a physical battle and ready to stay in the middle. So I'm, again, much like Allan earlier on, so happy to be wrong about stuff that I've said before. And it's Gullan's bravery that's sort of one of the key components in this goal, because he just basically runs and he's hurtling towards the ball, and Kyle Turner's like, oh, I don't like this. And then he's, okay, I'll put the ball somewhere, but then that somewhere happens to be directly into the path of Finlay Pollock, who you've got to give, again, an enormous amount of credit to Finlay Pollock because he's so quick off the mark, and Dan O'Reilly doesn't have a clue. It's much like how when we lost that first goal against Falkirk back just recently, with Henderson coming sneaking behind Scott Brown, it was almost a similar vein to that, in the sense that O'Reilly is so slow off the mark compared to Pollock, who's right on his heels. He's very okay, I know what I need to do. I need to get into a position where I can get onto this. And he anticipates it. Just the anticipation there's a different level. And it's a great finish as well. So yeah, all credit to both of our forwards for getting involved there.
Yeah, definitely. And then the second goal, I mean, it's relatively soon after that, 25 minutes in, we get the second goal. So this one, as we said, it's a Josh Mullin free kick that comes over. It's a really decent free kick. It doesn't come to anything. It ends up being recycled at the back post. And then Dylan Easton kind of zips it in. And the Rovers on Twitter earlier on described this goal as Pollock being right place, right time, and also described it as an instinctive finish. Iain, do you think they're almost doing him a bit of a disservice there?
Yeah, probably. I think he's not actually in the right place when the cross is about to come in. I think he's got to get himself into the right place, and those are definitely two different things. Liam, before the kind of ball in, Liam Dick actually does really well to keep the ball in. It would have been really easy I think it's going for a corner, but he kind of gets there and keeps it in and then recycles it back to Easton. Easton does the step over, like it's just what Easton does. Do you know what I mean? Like it doesn't matter who he's coming up against, he's going to try that, and he's so good at it. Whips a great ball in. And it's funny that you mentioned the Scott Brown at the back post thing in the last wee bit there, Robbie, because I've actually got it down in my notes. What O'Reilly does, trying to defend it, actually reminded me of that. It's like he's kind of trying to like ease him out the way and shepherd it and just kind of let it go across. But Pollock's too quick, and he gets across the front of him, and it's, you know, he's not going to miss from there. But it's great to see Pollock kind of developing into this front man. It's funny because like I don't think Gullan is a 9 on his own, and I don't think Pollock is a 9 on his own. But together they've just got that wee bit of chemistry, you know, and they can press from the front, and like that's what Pollock's game is. Robson was really vocal in his post-match interview where he was like, you know, he maybe wasn't making the right runs in the right places and not doing it at the right times, and just getting to spend that wee bit of time with Robson on the training pitch is making him like a better striker. That's what you want for your manager ultimately, isn't it?
I actually thought that because I get the benefit obviously at the time, David Mitchell, the sort of camera angle behind the goal with the replay on Rave TV, and I actually thought David Mitchell should have done better with it. Like Easton's sort of ball across the face of goal, it's inside the 6-yard box, and you see the angle of Mitchell diving down. I think he gets fingertips to it, but I think he probably should actually be stopping it before it even gets to Pollock. But I do think that Pollock's done the right thing and just kind of gambled, but also went, well, I need to be there to make sure that I'm the one tapping this in if it gets to me. But
Not the last time we're going to talk about Mitchell, is it?
No, but like we've said this before, that Partick are in a shocker of a position coming into the end of the season now. The fact that they've got a goalie on the bench that is 17, 18, never played the game, and they've now got to just trust David Mitchell as their first goalie, and they had to, obviously, because it was a loan, accept that Miles Roberts got recalled, and he was arguably the best goalie in the league this season. So it's a massive difference.
With Miles Roberts, you know what he's doing? Riding the pines down in Bristol, down at the Rovers down there. He's not getting a game for them, so that must be infuriating if you're a Thistle fan. Like, you've had a goalkeeper that's been in such good form. Just to go back to the sort of the front three, shall we call them, of Easton, Gullan and Pollock, I think that it's probably fair to say that over his time at Rovers, Jamie Gullan's always worked best with a sort of strike partner. Like we saw it in the COVID season with Lewis Vaughan. But almost it was like a throwback to about like 8 or 9 years ago in football when you had false nines, because Dylan Easton could come centrally and then you would occasionally see Gullan. It didn't happen very often, but from time to time Gullan would maybe drift out a wee bit, or Pollock would drift out a bit, and Easton would sort of move into that central role. And yeah, it was just really... I don't think it would have flattered Partick if we'd gone in 3-0 up at half time, because again, you've got the Scott Brown one that cannons off the post. And that was a really, I mean, even if he'd fed in Finlay Pollock, there was a chance for Pollock to get a potential hat-trick there. But you can understand why Brown's shooting at the same time. Yeah. Yeah, I don't think it would have flattered them at all if we'd gone in at half-time 3 up. And again, I know that I mentioned it before, but Dan O'Reilly, he just had a really, really poor game defensively. I mean, you look back to the yellow card that he picked up in that free kick that Mullin took for the second goal. He's nowhere near him. He just absolutely sipes him down. It's like he's just given up. And I think that was a recurring theme across that Thistle team. They just looked really rudderless over the 90 minutes.
I was also not sure that Lee Ashcroft should have been playing, you know. Like, he was wearing that bandage around his head. He took one. He took a really, like, Scott Brown hit a shot and it smacked him right in the face, and he was really wobbly after it. Like he properly had and I'm thinking they should be looking at him. If that's rugby, he's going off for a head injury assessment. Whereas football we don't seem to have got to grips with that kind of thing yet. And then he took another one. He took another one in the second half as well, and they waved the physio away. It's like people need to be taking all the kind of football stuff out there. Just looking after the guy. People need to be taking it out of his hands. He should not have a say in that. The physio should be coming and actually saying, right, we're going to actually look at you and see if you're all right.
Yeah.
I mean, that was just a bit weird.
I don't know what the story is with his kind of Terry Butcher impression, because he's been like that for months. Because it took me a good few weeks. Every now and again, you'd see like a photo just scrolling through Twitter and be like, is he taking another one? Like this? The unluckiest guy in the country.
You wonder if it's like to protect certain stitches or something that are in place in his head. But I don't know. But there was even the one, it was actually, I think, before Bruni even had his chance to hit the post, where he's like, the ball comes out and he just goes to absolutely leather it. And it was like basically a spare in 10-pin bowling where he's knocked three of them off their feet and they all just start spreading it. I honestly just about fell off the couch laughing at that, the fact that them three just diving in, but then all just falling off when he's been absolutely scalped by the ball. Again, it was Ashcroft involved in that.
Aye, that your point there about O'Reilly as well, Robbie. I think that, in large part, I think that's a symptom of playing guys out of position as well. Like, why are you playing a centre half at left back? You've just got a left back. We talk about it a lot, but he's just like he's having a second guess. Yeah, ridiculous decision making. And actually, I mean, on the subject of ridiculous decision making, that Brown chance where he hits the post starts with, I mean, it's a fairly soft free kick. Easton kind of gives Scott Martin a bit of a shove, and he goes down. But they get the free kick, and then Logan Chalmers, for some reason, only known to him, with one of it, like his sort of primary defensive midfielder, lying on the floor on the touchline, cuts a pass into his other holding midfielder, who's just standing there. But the thing with this, really, is that the Rovers are then on him. There's 4 Rovers players in very close quarters, and Bannigan just gets absolutely melted into by Jamie Gullan, actually. Maybe that comes back later on. And this Brown takes that away, but it really is a case of, as you say, Brown has every right to go for that, and he comes incredibly close. But he's got Pollock on one side, he's got Easton on the other, and Gullan's still there as well, having won the ball back.
Meglo wasn't far away from scoring an OG with his clearance as well, actually. It was a bit closer to the goal than I think he meant. Like,
swings in at that. That, I think, is possibly the kind of clearest embodiment of what we're getting from Barry Robson that we wouldn't have had otherwise, for me. I don't think we'd have done that under Ian Murray. I don't think we'd have done that under Neil Collins. Don't get me wrong, we would have done different things. I'm not saying that's necessarily the best thing in the world, but that's where, when Barry Robson's doing his interviews and he's talking about the run-in and the press and all that kind of stuff, that's where you're seeing it. Like, just, they take a quick free kick, and before they know what's happening, we've hit the post. It's impressive to see just that level of that kind of quick break. So I think that probably does take us up to half time, and at this point, Kris Doolan decides to make life more difficult for himself, because Scott Martin, I actually thought was possibly Thistle's best player in the first half. Not necessarily a lot of quality, but he at least looked up for it, which you couldn't necessarily say for all of his teammates. So he takes him out of the midfield, effectively asking Bannigan to do all that job by himself. And he puts Josh Reid on at left back, who was decent enough. I have no idea why he didn't start. And then for some mad reason, decides to play Kyle Turner at right back. Iain, we had Kyle Turner for a good chunk of last season. How many times did you think, I'd like to see him at right back?
Yeah, it's none, isn't it? It's absolutely none. He's got none of the attributes to play there. And I don't think that's the first time they've done that.
No.
I'm sure, if memory serves me correct, like he's played them multiple times. And then
I think he played left back as well at some point.
yeah, I think you're right, actually. And there was multiple times during the second half where he was like visibly remonstrating with Logan Chalmers. Like, he just doesn't know where to be. He's got no attributes to play there. He's not good in the air. Like, he's not got a I'm not going to say he's not got a defensive bone in his body, because he certainly does, but he's just not that player.
Nah.
And it made our afternoon so much easier. Bizarre.
Like, it somehow manages to be a really bad choice, like on both fronts. Like, you're making your defence worse by putting him in it, and you're making your midfield worse by taking him out of it. Like, it's
They
absolutely...
became like less creative by doing that. Which, and you're 2-0 down. Why?
I just could not understand it at all. Like,
Crazy.
you could almost understand it if, say, Megwa was injured, for example, and you're like, right, we don't have another right, but we need to reshuffle, but I don't want to take Kyle Turner off for his set pieces. You could almost see you rejig it. As you say, he's done it before. That's one of his things that he likes doing. I just like... I mean, you could... Jamie Gullan basically came out the tunnel, like, rubbing his hands together for that.
You wonder if they've looked and saw how effective Josh Mullin was and thought, we can try that. We can try playing it. But then he didn't actually play as a kind of more up, kind of, a forward-going wing-back. He was very much a straightforward right-back.
Yeah,
They didn't... It was like they had this idea and then just didn't follow through with it. Or something. I don't know. It was just bizarre.
And that, I mean, just to actually stick on Jamie Gullan for a bit, because I know you mentioned them already, but he is in my mess of notes to talk about, because I have just been really, really impressed with him since he came back. Just, as you say, Jamie Gullan Mark V. It's like Jamie Gullan Mark V GTI that we've got, I think. It just seems to be like more sort of physical, but more deliberate as well. Like my kind of criticism when he left, the reason why I wasn't that bothered was he kept drifting out wide. He doesn't drift anywhere anymore. He might go out wide, but he does it with full intent to go and body Kyle Turner and then come back again. And as you said, Robbie, he's perfect foil for Finlay Pollock. Just his control and everything. I mean, Allan, how have you felt about Jamie Gullan since he's been back in?
Very much the same. I think he was a prime example of something I spotted from the whole team yesterday, in that they were really physical and really aggressive, but in a right side of the line kind of way. They were in on, like, every single time the Thistle player was getting the ball, there was a Rovers player right on them, pressing them, like, challenging them, barging into them, even knocking them over, just out muscling them. They were doing it all over the pit. You talked about it for Scott Brown's effort in the first half. There was just so much of that, and Jamie Gullan was the epitome of it. Like, Jamie Gullan's not a wee guy. He's not small. He's quite he's strong, but he's going up against guys like Lee Ashcroft, who are big, strong brutes of experienced championship centre halves, and Jamie Gullan was bullying him at times. That shouldn't happen. But he's come back he's clearly learned a few things over in Ireland that he's brought back to us, and we are very much reaping the benefits from it, and long may it continue.
Yeah, it's not like he went over to Ireland and was like a roaring success. I mean, he was playing a team that wasn't doing well. I'm not suggesting it was his fault by any means at all, but he scored some free kicks and played some football, but I don't think anyone expected him to come back having really sort of developed or be full of confidence or anything like that. But he's been excellent. He really has. But then we got to one of the funniest minutes of football we've seen in a long time. Starts off with a very straightforward and very low pressure pass back. And Robbie, why don't you pick up the tale from there, please?
Oh, it was 5 minutes of fun, wasn't it? Just a really, really straightforward, the most simple thing. Now, I can only imagine if that had been Kevin Dabrowski on the on the receiving end of that pass, and that had happened, because it would have been absolutely tonto. Now, we've touched upon how Miles Roberts was a superb goalkeeper. Already, in the games that David Mitchell has played, he's conceded far more goals than Roberts did, even though he's played far less games already for Thistle. And yeah, it was the most basic thing. And then, I don't know what gets said, but Gullan just laughs. Like, it's like watching the Super Bowl again. I didn't watch the Super Bowl, of course, but Kendrick Lamar was grin. That's basically Jamie Gullan. He was just grinning. And then, Bannigan decides to do his finest Drake impression and just get absolutely raging at him. It was just incredible. Incredible stuff. I'm going to let someone else, I'm going to nominate Iain to pick it up for the rest of this, because I feel like he's got a good bit to say on this topic.
It's just, I've actually been thinking about it since yesterday. I'm trying to think of a bigger head loss at Starch Park, and I can't. He absolutely lost the plot. I'd love to know what Jamie Gullan said. And I tried to go back. You obviously get the full match replay thing within the Wraith TV kind of lounge hub thing. And the camera, Wraith TV are too good. They've got too many camera angles. So when, I think it's Josh Mullin or maybe Dylan Easton standing waiting to take the corner, and the camera cuts to like one that's focused on him. And because it cuts and it's just a replay of the live feed, you don't get to see what happened. I'm like, fuck off, Wraith TV. Let me see what happened. So you actually miss it and there's no chance of getting it. But Bannigan just loses the plot. And like the referee pulls them in. And he's like giving him, telling him calm down. And Jamie Gullan's like, what's the me, ref? No, I'm not doing anything. He's got his hands up. And Bannigan goes for him again. Like he's right in his face. Like the referee's like 1 yard away trying to talk to you. Just shut up. Obviously the corner comes in. The Rovers did that thing where they're all within the box and then they withdraw. And Gullan comes out and then curves his run slightly. And they're like, see in the replay. The referee is not looking at anyone else.
No.
He's standing, staring. And Jamie Gullan goes to run round him and Bannigan is like 2 hands. Like, over you go. Penalty. Absolutely insane. The only thing, I don't know how he stayed in the park because it's a second jail.
No idea.
But you know what? I'm actually glad he never got sent off because he then got the embarrassment sub of taking off before you're sent off, and I think that's ultimately better for the banner.
See, you're mentioning the Wraith TV thing there. I don't know if you clocked this, but like when he's actually coming off, he says something to Ben Stanway that he's replacing. It's almost like he's like, go and give that Gullan like a 2-footer or something.
Definitely what he's saying. Definitely.
Honestly, he's just gone. It's like you can see the eyes are like away. But aye, carry on, Scott.
So, what I don't understand after all that brilliant viewing for the 3-4 minutes it was going on, see before the corner's taken, after he's had a talking to, after he's been booked, and still the referee's looking at him. See if I'm a teammate, somebody else is marking Gullan.
Yeah.
Like, somebody has to tell Bannigan, somebody it's roughly, I'm not saying Ashcroft, you go and leave your man, but go and take one of the wingers or whoever's in the box and swap Bannigan, put him on the line or something, far away from Gullan, because clearly Gullan's clearly in his head about something, and he's just lost the plot. But the fact that they've just left him to him, and then the penalty's been given, it was the most obvious thing that was about to come, and you're just like, that was clearly Partick also 2-0 down, nothing's going for them, and they just completely, everybody was either switched off or just didn't give a damn, basically.
To say how stupid it was, I don't think I even watched the flight of the ball. I just watched Gullan and
That was exactly the same.
Like, it was the referee line for him.
It's such a proper shove as well. It's not like a football shove. It's not like, I'm just going to kind of put there's no deniability, and it just properly empties him out. And you see that, like, I think even Jamie Gullan is taken by surprise because he's got kind of Looney Tunes legs as he goes down, because he's expecting to at least kind of, you get like a shove in the back and you tip forward, it properly clears him out. And I'm really pleased that they got a photo of Jamie Gullan's big smiling face. because obviously you don't get that, and he's got his back to the camera for the highlights.
Again,
because that's the thing is,
and
it
Kendrick Lamar.
It looks from the reverse angle like, oh, here's two guys squaring up. And it really wasn't. It was one guy squaring up to someone else who was like, what's happening? I don't know why you're acting like this. And just even the ref, like, properly kind of incredulous. Like, do you realise I'm here? Because, like, when he books him, I think 9 times out of 10, when you get a situation like that, if a yellow card's coming out, he's going to book both players.
Mm-hmm.
But he hasn't finished telling them off before Bannigan starts squaring up to Jamie Gullan again. And you see the yellow card, he's like, what are you doing? Right. And then the only reason, see that we're saying, why did they not get a second yellow? I genuinely think the ball is nowhere near them at any point. So it's like, there's not enough of it. There's like, it's not affecting the game in any way at all for it to justify a yellow card. Like, there's no chance he was ever going to become anything because the ball, I don't think has even entered the box yet, and it's going to the back post. Just
if they hadn't, when he gets subbed, like he'd already, after the penalty and the kind of plays restarted, he'd already gone like charging into what looked like it was going to he was going to wipe somebody out, probably Gullan. And then you think, like, if the ball hadn't gone out of play then, he was absolutely going to nail someone and get sent off.
Yeah.
Like, he was very lucky the ball went out of play when it did.
I was amazed Doolan let there be, like, a phase of play in between. That was reckless.
Because he had them lined up to come on, but he left it. But I was going to make the comparison that it was like watching Blues Brothers film, because it was just like, carnage keeps unfolding and you're thinking, nothing more stupid can happen now. And then something infinitely more stupid, like Carrie Fisher coming along with a bazooka and then they just walk out the wreckage. It's just so dumb. Like, and then he gives away the penalty, and again, it's not really picked up upon by, I think as much by Rafe TV, but like, you're watching it, and then him, Bannigan, and about 4 other Thistle players surround the referee like, why have we given a penalty for that? You've just barged them over. It's the most blatant penalty that you could expect.
It's so good, man. I mean, there's the other... To your question, Ian, I genuinely can't think of a bigger head loss. And I tell you why, because I can think of other players losing the head, but there's always been like a very obvious provocation. So like, Davo got sent off years ago, shocker, for booting the ball into Robert Snodgrass's face.
Yeah.
But it was because Snodgrass had dived. So, like, you could at least understand it. Like, there was nothing in that. There was no point where it looked like Hammer had done anything remotely. And it's even at the first sign where, like, Dylan Easton, for example, out of, like, mischief alone, would have squared up back again, effectively. Like, if Bannigan squares up to him, and Gullan's just laughing in his face. And the other one I want to call out for this, because I thought it was incredible, Liam Dick's involvement. when the yellow card comes out, because he's leaning out from behind someone else, clapping at Stuart Bannigan in the most obvious, like, oh, this guy's head's gone. I can definitely get him a second yellow.
4 of them realised.
Trying to keep himself on the line of like, I don't want to pick up a yellow for this though. So he's doing it in a very kind of comedic sense as well. Like, it's very clearly a joke hand clap. And
Can I go back to what Scott was saying though? It took about 3 or 4 of them to kind of drag him away from Gullan before the corner comes in. So why have they let him go and like Mark? And then you could have talked about the referee was only looking at him. Not only was he just looking at him, he actually walks towards them. He's only about 4 or 5 feet away from them, just staring at him, because he knew, like everyone else in that stadium knew, apart from maybe Doolan and the rest of the Partick Thistle defence, exactly what was going to happen. It was just brilliant.
You're one of the other defenders and you're like, right, all we need is for Banzo to keep us cool and we can just manhandle anyone in this box, because the lino's not going to really have much power. We could just haul anyone down.
And like, he's supposed to be that guy for them as well. Like, he's the guy who, like, gets a booking every week but never gets sent off. Like, does the tactical fouls but never goes too far. Like, keeps the heat when everybody else is losing theirs. And he's just like, nah, fuck it. Shut
Scott, see if Dylan Easton ever does that and has that head loss, right, then I'll agree with you about a fine
Not
for a
gonna
week's
lie,
wages.
it came into my head. I was like, see if it was our team. Like, not that Dylan Easton's the one that's like an aggressor going after somebody, but like it's the sort of thing like just back chatting, like something like as simple as it was early in the season in the Queen's Park game. Just stuff like that. That's the sort of stuff as a fan you get so annoyed at your team doing it, but at the other end, it's so funny when it's happening to your team via an opponent.
It's not
But,
our
like,
paragon of
another,
virtue,
like,
though,
head
Jamie
loss-
Gullan. Innocent Jamie Gullan.
Another head loss that it came to my head when we were discussing it in the group chat earlier was like Dougie Hill versus the Pars, when we were told at half time we would be coming out with 9 men. And it was just like, well, we've seen there was obviously the shamash going on, but then you've seen the pictures later in the papers of Dougie Hill literally throttling, was it George Falkenham?
Falkenham,
Yes.
Yeah.
You're just like, fair enough.
Aye.
We've not actually discussed the fact that the penalty was shite and
Aye.
Mitchell should have saved
Aye,
it.
not even our worst
But-
penalty of this
like,
season.
within that whole thing, there was a goal. Like, Mitchell, a hologram. Like he is a hologram. Murder.
Aye, just-
They'll need to get somebody better if they're to improve. He's
I hope
stinking.
we don't know.
I don't know if they can. That's the thing. I mean, they obviously they can still bring in loanees, but like with the way that they've been talking in terms of like their finances, they're already over budget. So like it's such an imbalanced squad. I know that we touched on it pre-match in terms of the podcast, but again, it doesn't help when you get like the most daft. And again, to reiterate, it should have been a sending off. That's the second league game in a row where the opposing team have been very lucky to leave with a full complement of players on the pitch. Because we have Brand Spencer should have been sent off for Falkirk. Kicks the ball away when he's on the booking. Referee's going to pull out a card and then doesn't. And then with the Bannigan one, I know that you guys have mentioned it. He was literally charging about the pitch to try and get after Gullan after that penalty had been taken. Like, just when the ball was back in play. Like, it was clear he was making a beeline for him. And he got very lucky that he got hauled off as quickly as he did. Because otherwise, yeah.
Mitchell did get a decent hand to that penalty as well, but I think Easton's just managed to get enough power on it. It was a similar one, but it was in the air of the one at Falkirk in the Scottish Cup. Same direction, same way, but he's just got that little bit enough power to get sorted by the keeper. But I mean, obviously on Rave TV they did discuss that could they have given it to Finlay Pollock for a hat-trick, but then at the same time, we know what we've been like at 2 goals up in games, even when teams are not in the game, that just one goal could swing it. And I was just like, no, to be honest, I actually thought maybe Jamie Gullan might take it because he won it. But then I was like, well, Easton's been taking them all season, so I'd be surprised if he just accepts Gullan coming in and taking it. But
I'm a big fan of if you've got a designated penalty taker, they take the penalty. They're the best
until
guy for the job. They take the
until
penalty.
we miss it.
Unless it's 5-0 or something, then fair enough. You get to the guys in the hat-trick. But
or until he misses one.
Yep.
Absolutely.
Until you said it there, it hadn't even occurred to me that Finlay Pollock was on a hat-trick and could have taken that penalty. Just the thought never entered my mind.
I'll be brutally honest as well. I think that with the way that game was going, I feel like Finlay Pollock probably says, take it, because I feel like I can score another. Like, just the way that he was performing yesterday. Like,
just 2 kind of final points that I've got noted down here. So one is that Thistle side, right? And I know we've spent a fair bit of time talking about them, but they're in 4th place, right? So they are very much our target at the moment. And again, as we said at the start, if we get beat next week, we'll be back to worrying about 9th again. But for now, we've won a game, so we're thinking about 4th. 6 points behind, 2 games in hand. Their squad is paper thin in terms of who they've got available. So you saw the team line came out yesterday. Looking at the bench that they had for that game. So their goalkeeper is Louise Cameron. I don't know, never heard of him. Presumably he's the 17-year-old laddie.
aye.
There's Matthew Falconer, whose squad number is even higher than Louise Cameron's. So I'm assuming he's also a child for all intents and purposes. Transfermarkt doesn't even have his position down. He's just unlisted. So, yeah, presumably a young guy. Josh Reed, who obviously came on at the left back, totally fine. Robbie Crawford came on fine-ish as a championship player. Ben Stanley, he's all right. They were heavily rumoured to be trying to get rid of him early in the season. Xander McKenzie, 19-year-old right back who's come out of the youth system, and Aaron Muirhead, who I hadn't realised was on the bench until they brought him off for 5 minutes to go. It's like, why have you let Kyle Turner do that for 40 minutes? They had 2 right backs on the bench. Ridiculous. But where I was going with that is, Iain, to what extent, looking at that yesterday, if you just put Brian Graham back in, how much of a difference do you think he makes to that Thistle team?
I think he's probably the glue that holds the squad together, and I think that's probably the best way to look at it. Yes, you've got the goals, but you've got, like, he's in the ref's ear. He's badgering his teammates. He's telling them where to be. He's like the leader on the park. And you take him out and you look round that squad and you're like, there's nobody else doing that. There was multiple times where the players were arguing with one another. Ashcroft was going off his head at everybody. Chalmers and Turner were having a go at one another. Macbeth, who by the way is terrible, he was going rage at other people. Like, they don't look like a cohesive unit. And I think if you put Graham back in that, he's like, you stop it. You're not marking him at that corner. You need to try harder. Like, do you know what I mean? I think he just totally, he's like he's the missing piece. And without them, they're not a top 4 side. And I think we saw that.
Yeah. He's a manager on the park for them. That's what he is. Because
for sure.
Dylan, he stands there at the side of the park. But I very rarely, even at games that I've been at when we've been playing Partick, do you hear him. He's literally just stood there, hands crossed, just watching the game like we are. But yet Brian Graham's the one barking orders. So I think he just leaves Brian Graham to do it. And then half time he has his say.
It's such a weird dynamic. You feel like Doolan's like watching just a really nice guy, but he's just no suited for that role. And to have a character like Brian Graham on the pitch that already works in management with the women's team is, just very strange. Shout out as well for Fitzpatrick, who seemingly at one point got overlapped by Dan O'Reilly or Turner at one of the two. The ball then went into our possession. I was reading online, and then O'Reilly worked harder to get back because Fitzpatrick just couldn't be arsed.
Fitzpatrick's never going to do that for you.
Yeah, he's just checked out. Just like one of those ones. And I think we had the polar opposite of that yesterday. In particular, mentions for Matthews and Brown, because I mean, we'll cover the sort of man of the match in the full squad, but I felt that with Matthews and Brown in the middle of the park, I know that they're not wingers, or wingers did work incredibly hard, but those two were everywhere. And see, there was a couple of occasions where Scott Brown got half down in the middle of the park, and almost immediately, when the ball was bobbling away, Partick Thistle player comes away with it, and Ross Matthews just comes in like, bam, like straight away. There wasn't any questions. And I know that Scott Brown took a lot of flack for the derby, but that was a brilliant performance that we put on yesterday. Thoroughly enjoyable to watch.
Yeah, definitely. Just the final point that I've got here, and then as you say, we'll do man the match. The impact of substitutes.
Yeah.
So we got Montague, Gibson, and Marsh all came on, all very much coming on to do what I think we're about to come to expect from Barry Robson, which is they're all effort, all action. Rob, we'll stick with you. How impressed were you with those three? And feel free to pick out anyone in particular.
I enjoyed them bopping it about, shall we say. And Montague was the one that stood out for me. I think he's got such a high ceiling. I know that I've spoken about this before and sort of been very vocal in my praise. There was that pass out to the wing. I can't remember who it was to. It might have been... I
think it was Gibson.
And he's just curved it round. And you can just see, like, I mentioned, and I got a bit of flack for this within our group chat for calling him a unit at that sort of East Fife game. What I meant in the sense is that he's a very big lad for his age. Now he looks like he's grown into his frame as well. Just the sort of nutrition.
I'd be more inclined to give you that now than in July.
Just the foresight. But yeah, he's just in general, just looks really like he's getting to grips with the level that he's comfortable, that he's coming into a game like that. And there's not any questions of it being like a one where we're going to be chucking the game. There's not any sort of like a blazingly snow, shall we say, where you feel like, oh, this might create an issue where we're now playing with 10 players and one that's maybe a little bit below the level. Because it just feels like he's coming onto a game and he's getting more and more confident. And I think that over time, that he's going to be able to kick on to another level. Kai Montague.
He's only 17. He's only 17, and I don't even think he'd played much first team football at East Kilbride before we signed him. I think he was only just coming out of their youth system, and he looks every bit a kind of not necessarily a regular starter in the Championship yet, but he is only 17. But he doesn't look out of place coming off the bench in the Championship. He's a talent. He's going to go far in the game, I think.
Do you know what I like the most about him? Is that he's so brave on the ball and not afraid. I think Ross Matthews or maybe Scott Brown lost the ball and he absolutely went through him.
Right.
Do you know what I mean? Like he totally gave him a bit. And if you're a senior player, you're thinking, who's this guy, man? Like 17-year-old going on, he meet abuse. But he's so brave, takes the ball in difficult positions, not afraid to try like the kind of flair with the pass.
He asks for it as well. He's demands it.
I'm looking forward to him getting the first goal. His attempt. We'll not discuss it that much. But yeah, I'm the same. I'm coming round. I think he's going to be a big player.
Yeah, I think we've been a wee bit critical of Barry Robson and his kind of use of his substitutes, or his lack of use of substitutes almost. But I think he must have been quite reassured watching that on Saturday. That actually these guys have come on and done the job I want them to do. I mean, Gibson was everywhere. Come off the bench, just crashing around, smashing into people, and again, that kind of direct running that you want. Marsh is very unlucky not to score. To be fair, I think he does everything right with that chance when he gets it back onto his stronger foot. David Mitchell's not saving that. I think it's only the intervention of Josh Reid that stops that being a goal. So that, again, good to see, getting the subs on a little bit earlier than we had done. And, no real kind of drop-off, if anything. I mean, we certainly looked more likely to score than they did at any point. Yeah. I mean, there really was just no jeopardy in that game at all. I was actually thinking, they got a corner with about 5 minutes to go. And I was thinking, like, if this goes in, if they get a goal for here, there's going to be this narrative's going to pop up about, the Rovers are collapsing. It was like, it couldn't be further from the truth. Yeah. Like, if that happens, it's a freak event and it couldn't be anything else. And obviously, it didn't come to anything.
I said
just nothing at all.
Prior to the game against Hamilton, like, bemoaning the lack of comfortable victories. Those games like yesterday, or that case one, where we never saw that level of comfort under Ian Murray or Neil Collins. The only ones that really jumps out are sort of Arbroath were done and dusted on the final day. We had the derby against Dunfermline where we won 2-0 as well under Murray. And those were two games where we were like, okay, those are the ones last season.
6 past Cove or something.
Yeah, 6-1 or something like that. And then under Neil Collins, we had like one where we beat Ayr United 2-0 and it looked comfortable, but nothing to the degree that Robson's got us playing. Particularly where we don't look content at 3-0 as well. That's the thing. We look like we're just like, okay, we want to go for the jugular. We want to get our goal difference up. This is a Partick Thistle team who are above us in the league. They're in 4th place. We want to be where they are. We want to give them every reason to sit there and say, shit, Raith Rovers are on our tail. And I think that the squad deserve a huge amount of credit for that as well, because that's a sort of shift, hopefully, in terms of where we're at in the mentality. As you rightfully say, we lose the next game, then we go straight back to everyone being on their high horses and depressed. But it was I feel like it was a really good statement. And games like that are going to give you the opportunity to bleed in players like Montague, and to a lesser extent because he's got more experience, Gibble.
I'm glad you mentioned that Hamilton game, actually, because that was something I wanted to say tonight that I very nearly forgot. Personally, after that Hamilton game, I don't think I gave the Rovers an awful lot of credit, because my attitude was almost like, well, you've done well, and well done for winning 3-0, but Hamilton are so bad that anybody would have beaten them 3-0 that night. However, just done the same thing to Thistle.
Mhm.
And once it's happened twice, you start to think, well, hang on a second, do they look that bad because we've made them look that bad? And Hamilton obviously are relatively bad. But immediately after that game, walked out of New Douglas Park that night thinking, right, well, we've beaten them 3-0. They're playing Ayr United there on the Saturday. Like, that's going to be 5 or 6. And actually, it was 2-0. They kept Ayr out for a long, long time. They then kept St Johnstone out for a long time and conceded a really unlucky goal. And then they won on yesterday. So actually, given what's happened since, I don't think it is fair of me, as I said, to say, well, actually, all right, you won 3-0 at Hamilton, but who are Hamilton? Because it did exactly the same to Thistle there.
Yeah.
And actually, to an even greater degree, I've just not given them a sniff at all. And I think, actually, as I say, I didn't give them enough credit. I think they do deserve more credit for that. Because once you've done it twice, that's repeat evidence, effectively.
The dynamic within the league feels like it is changing to a good degree, because Queen's Park are in absolute freefall. If you look at the results, they've lost 8 of their last 11, I believe it was, in terms of where they're at. I feel very much like they're going to have the Grant Murray effect with Callum Davidson, where you win at Ibrox and that's going to buy you time, but then it's going to be at the detriment of your sort of season. If they keep losing games like that, then the media will then automatically be like, oh, you've got a double cup winning manager who's taken a multi-million team apart at Ibrox, winning 1-0 with one shot on target with one shot. But that's not going to show you the full picture of where they're at. Thistle, obviously, we've discussed that in great detail. Hamilton seem to be in a bit of a strange position where, as you rightfully say, they're picking up a few results. Morton have still got this unbeaten run going, but as Allan mentioned earlier on in our group chat, or no, it was Leslie even in our group chat, it can very quickly go from a 9 unbeaten to a 3 or 4 without a win if you're drawing games. And yeah, Dunfermline just signed loads of players with double-barrelled surnames, and nobody's really sure whether they're actually any good or not. But
Football Manager 2037 save right now.
Aye.
Yeah. It's funny you mentioned Morton. I think we're probably running a bit long. We'll have to save your thoughts on Tommy Adeloy signing for Morton for another time.
I'm not bothered if Hammer's playing like that.
Yeah, good point. Let's do a quick round of man of the match, and then we'll get out of here. Scott, first of all, lots to choose from. Who's the man of the match?
Tough one. I mean, you can't complain Pollock winning it, to be honest. He's got the 2 goals. He played really well on top of that, and could have potentially got more goals. I thought Scott Brown was back to his best yesterday. He was so unlucky not to score yesterday. I mean, he had a few chances, hitting the post as well. So I think they were possibly the 2 standouts. Gullan had another very good game as well. And as we've all been saying, like he has adapted and changed his game to more of what we needed last season from him, but we weren't getting. So that's probably why nobody really kicked up a fuss when he did leave. But the fact that he's came back and adapted his game is great, because it means that he's showing us what now he's learned, basically. So if he keeps doing that, then he'll be a successful January signing for us. But yeah, I think they were the 3 that stood out for me. One, just before it goes to somebody else, I know somebody picked it up in the group chat earlier. I'd replied to something on Twitter about somebody doing like a team rating, and they'd put Josh Ray as 8.0 and they'd put Josh Mullin as like 6.7. I went, Josh Ray has played 3 passes and taken 3 goal kicks in that game, not had to face a shot. How he's managed to get above a 7, I don't know. Because
maybe it was for punching a stroke in the head.
At the end of the day, they wouldn't have had to. They'll have not had to wash any of his kit. Like, Like, it baffled me that.
yeah, me too.
Did you pick a man of the match yet, Scott?
Pollock or Bruni? I'm not sure.
Alan, how about you?
You know what? I'm actually going to probably ramble on a bit like Scott did as well, actually, but like we all will, largely because it's really hard to pick one. It's just like, but for a very good, like, we've had plenty of games this season where it's been hard to pick a man of the match, and sometimes we've not even bothered in a post-match because it's been that shite.
Yep.
This one, I think you have to just say credit to the whole team and to Barry Robson. They were brilliant. And I'm going to give actually credit to the back three. It's not that, like, Thistle had no chances, and it's not because the back three had nothing to do. It's just because everything they needed to do, they did it brilliantly. Paul Hanlon was outstanding. He was every bit the experienced Premiership centre-half we thought we were signing. And you know what? He has been for a number of weeks now. He's been getting some bizarre stick on, like, Pie and Bovril from complete roasters, who I'll not name, but we all know who they are. And it's just weird. It's weird because he's been outstanding for weeks now. And I thought yesterday, the three of them, I thought were brilliant. Matthews and Brown were brilliant. And just on pure effort and the way he bullied the defence round, I'd give it to Gullan.
Good stuff. Robbie, for you?
Finlay Pollock.
Can I just say as well, Finlay Pollock was brilliant. I'm just putting that out there again. Finlay Pollock was brilliant, and
Just got his dad.
And
Sorry, Finlay's dad.
And I have no problem with him getting it. She doesn't.
And Iain, finally for you, and your man of the match and any honourable mentions, please.
Yeah, I had Paul Hanlon, but Allan literally said everything that I was going to say about him, which has kind of pissed me off, so thanks, Allan. Hanlon has been excellent for weeks. He has been the best signing this season. I don't understand any of the kind of criticism he gets. Holds the defence. Like, let's not forget, he's not playing beside any other centre-halves. Like, he's the only one that's... They're nominally centre-halves. He's been superb, Paul Hanlon, and it also annoys me. Never wins the man of the match at the game, and he's just about man of the match every week. So
unless his foundation sponsoring it.
To be expected. But
I might need to annoy Blair and just change it to putting Stuart Bannigan as my man of the match, just for the comedy factor.
To be fair, I think there's a few Thistle players you could pick as well for their contribution to yesterday. Kyle Turner got an assist.
Luke Todd is going to be devastated that we've not you've not came in with the poetry prepared today, Duncan, but
sure we could think of something for Mitchell.
Yeah. Just I have to say, I had Hanlon noted down as well, just to mention him, because I think that your man Terry Ablady, just a non-fixture, isn't that?
He's not
did not touch the ball, because Hanlon was every single time had it away from him. Every single time. Josh Mullin, again, I think is worthy of a mention. You know, he's still adapting to that wing-back role. They kind of all are. As I said, there's been some tweaks in there. But I thought that was, we gave him man of the match in the Hamilton game, and it was up there with that. And I think it's just, the performance of others maybe just being up there as well. So certainly not going to try and take it off Finlay Pollock, but there was a lot of really standout performances there. Really, I mean, a complete victory.
Do you ever remember watching the Rovers game and feeling more comfortable? Like this season, normally the opposition get a corner and you're like, oh, even corners we were completely comfortable. Yeah. We never looked like conceding at all at any point.
Right after the end of the game, I said at full time on Twitter, I was like, that is the perfect game of football that we could have played. A 3-0 win, a clean sheet, and you leave. That is what you want from your Saturday afternoons. You want to go to the football, and I get that it's not always going to be the most pretty. Sometimes you are going to have just victories where you've got to grind it out, or stuff goes wrong, players get injured. With that, it was just every single player played their part, and you left thoroughly entertained, which is always a huge bonus on top of the emotional involvement. And let's not forget, I keep pushing the line, but we've still got Lewis Vaughan to come back, and Sean Byrne as well is getting ever closer. So
this is it. I mean, the thing you said earlier on about the sort of dynamic in the league and where various teams are. Thistle in the window have undeniably got worse.
Yeah.
With the players that they've lost. Queen's Park have got worse. We're losing Dom Thomas as well. We've got better, and we will still get better as well. Or
We
at
don't
least
need to
the
rush them back
potential
either.
is there.
Aye.
You know, we
absolutely.
don't need to just throw Vaughan in for the hell of it because he's Lewis Vaughan. We can give him 10 minutes at the end of a game, give him 20 minutes in the next game, 3 or 4 sub-appearances before we start him, because we don't need to rush him back.
That's it. This is certainly the optimism is back. As we've said, we're very fragile. Wouldn't take much to knock it back out of us again. However, very much looking forward to next Saturday already. And that, again, has not been an ever-present emotion or state for us this season. And podcast-wise, we will be back, before you know it, we'll be back presumably Thursday night to look ahead to Hamilton's visit, which is good. Because since the last time we spoke about Hamilton, they've decided they want to build a hotel, which is good. So
Next to Callie's battery farm.
Yeah,
Well, they
sure
need,
we'll have
they
some
need
fun with
somewhere
that.
for all their Middle Eastern and US kids they're bringing over.
Yeah, and also somewhere to hold all their functions, since they're not allowed inside their own main stand outside of match days. But we'll talk about that on Thursday. So thank you, everybody, for joining us and for listening, and we will see you again then. Goodbye.